All right. Stephanie, this will be recorded and sent out to attendees. It will also be on our website, artsalliance.org/creative recovery. Of course. And we can go ahead and get started. I think we might be at critical mass here. Y'all are a punctual crew. Thank you so much for that. Welcome for our lunch webinar at noon here about B2B Arts. So this is the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities grant program, relief grant program, with the application that closes on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the 10th. A couple things about Zoom webinars real quick. You can use the chat. You can chat everyone, or you can chat just the panelists and us. You can also put specific questions in the Q&A box. I would recommend holding off on posting your questions in the Q&A box until we're through the presentation, because it may be that a lot of questions get answered through this presentation, because we've now been doing this for 4 weeks. So we've got a lot of these questions answered. We've got a lot of these questions on lock over here. So to get going, here's what's up. Arts Alliance Illinois. Who are we? Maybe you don't know us. We are a statewide advocacy organization. We are not the grant administrator for B2B Arts, but we are contracted by DCEO, that's the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, as a community navigator. So that means we're providing technical assistance. We're doing a bunch of outreach to try and make sure that everyone who is eligible knows about this grant opportunity, but we work for you. We are an arts advocacy organization. So at the end of the day, y'all are our constituents, not DCEO. My name is Casey Smith. I am the Director of Programs at Arts Alliance Illinois. I am joined by two wonderful, stalwart human beings on this call. One is Gillian, our fearless accounting expert, accounting czar. If you've seen our past webinars, first of all, welcome back. You must just love our webinars, but you have seen Gillian answering tons of questions around the accounting pieces of this application. And then of course, Christopher Johnson, Chris from the Lawyers for the Creative Arts, to help with any specific legal questions. If the two of you want to say hello.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everybody. This is Gillian. I deeply apologize that I'm not on camera with you all today, but appreciate you being here and just been so thrilled to work with Arts Alliance Illinois on this important work.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Casey, and thanks everyone for joining. This is a great opportunity for the arts sector, and we're very happy to be able to assist on it.
All right, moving right along. So this webinar, we're going to move a little quickly, but we are going to assume that you have looked at some of the basic information about B2B Arts. But just to give you a quick recap, this is $50 million that Arts Alliance and a group of awesome statewide advocates lobbied for last legislative session. We won. This is why advocacy matters. So now that $50 million is actually being distributed. And this is specifically meant to be for organizations, businesses, and sole proprietors that experienced a loss in either 2020 or 2021 due to COVID. So there are 5 eligible categories here: independent live venue operators, performing or presenting arts organizations, and that includes businesses or nonprofit or sole proprietors, in any of the following disciplines. So that's dance, theater, film, literary arts, media arts, music, or visual arts. Arts education organizations and sole proprietors, museums, and cultural heritage organizations. Now you will see a 6th item here. This is not a typo. This is me being a little snarky. There are 5 eligible categories in the statute, but for reasons that we do not totally know, DCEO added movie theaters as an additional category on the application. So if you see that on the application, don't be alarmed. but that's also there if you're going if you're going through the application. And if you're a movie theater, you can choose movie theater. But know that just because that is a separate category, that doesn't mean that these other categories are that specific. So we'll go through some of those categories and what they mean specifically. So one question that we've gotten a lot is freelancers, individual artists, are they eligible? And the answer is possibly. Sole proprietors are eligible specifically under the performing or presenting arts category or under the arts education category. So these are folks that are working in one of those disciplines or folks that are working as teaching artists. And we'll talk a little bit about what kind of those different entity types are. But if you're a freelancer that's operating as a sole proprietor or an LLC, you are probably eligible if you meet the other criteria. Moving right along. So these are literally screenshots from the eligibility guidelines, but I just want to point out a couple important things. So this is first for the independent live venue operators. One of the questions that we've been getting are from different organizations that are private event venues, folks that are like wedding venues or that sort of thing. So I want to point out on here that there's a couple characteristics that are important to note. And one of the big ones is it needs to be public. This needs to be someplace where there's a cover charge, there's a paid ticket to attend the performance, that there's a door entrance fee. So unless you're a wedding venue that does like live public weddings, which first of all, I mean, hit me up because that sounds like a dream. The other important thing to note here is that it has to be a destination for live entertainment where artistic programming is the main driver. So those are some kind of important things to keep in mind when thinking about whether or not you would be eligible as a venue. Performing and presenting arts. This is the big one. This is a big, broad bucket. So this is businesses, sole proprietors, nonprofits who are working in any of these artistic disciplines. So this is where there's pretty broad eligibility, and a lot of folks are going to fall under this category. Keep going. The last three, arts education, museums, and cultural heritage organizations. Again, with arts education, it could be a business sole proprietor or nonprofit. Museums are fairly straightforward. They're museums. The grayest of the categories is the cultural heritage organization. And actually, we've seen a pretty low number of cultural heritage organizations that are applying for the grant so far. So I want to point out this in particular in case you or maybe someone in your community or in your network may be eligible under this. This is community cultural and arts centers, ethnic and cultural awareness organizations, or festivals focused on promoting and preserving ethnic, cultural, racial, regional, linguistic, or regional or religious traditions. If you're like, that seems really mushy as a definition, we can see that, and we would just encourage folks, if they think they might be eligible, to apply or to hit up our help desk, which we'll get into what our kind of technical assistance offerings are a little bit later. But if you have specific questions, you can come ask us directly and get some one-on-one support. Applications are due Wednesday, May 10th, but here's a really important thing to note. If you haven't already logged into the application portal, it is really easy. It is a very straightforward application. So unless you run into some sort of technical glitch, or if you have a really, really complex situation with the way that your taxes are, it's actually a very quick application. So I want to encourage everyone not to think that because they're coming at it here in these kind of last 4 or 5 days, that means they don't have enough time to get an application in. There's no narrative portion. It is just putting your tax returns in, answering a couple really simple questions, and confirming your identity. The other important thing about this grant is that it is not first come, first served. And everyone who is eligible and applies will receive funding. So that's why it's really, really, really important that we get the word out to everyone who might be eligible, because this is an excellent, excellent opportunity to get money into the pockets of creative sector folks who lost money during COVID. All right, grant award. Gillian, this is where we start to bleed over into your territory here. So you just pop in anytime you want to save me.
Will do.
So the award amounts are between $5,000 and $250,000. So $5,000 is the minimum. The funding is based on a decline in revenue that you had between 2019 and 2020 or 2019 and 2021. DCO is going to look at both, and they're going to use whichever one is greater. For for-profits, they're looking at a decline in gross receipts. For nonprofits, they're looking at a decline in earned revenue. They're looking at the decline in contributed revenue, and they're looking at the decline in total revenue. And whichever of those three had the greater decline, that's the number they're using. That also means you don't have to have had a decline in all three of those categories. It could be just one of those categories that makes you eligible if you're a nonprofit. One important thing for everyone who didn't receive BIG or B2B, they will be looking at both, at 2020 compared to 2019 and 2021 compared to 2019. But if you received BIG or B2B, if you don't know what those are, don't worry, you didn't receive them. If you did not receive them, if you did receive them, they're only going to look at 2021 compared to 2019. A couple other notes on this. If you launched your business in early 2020, so you have to have been in business as of March 12th, 2020. If you started in early 2020, you will be eligible for the minimum grant amount, which is $5,000. If you started in late 2019, this is another thing that we've seen coming in through the help desk. And let's say you don't have, let's say you started in November of 2019. So you only had $5,000 worth of revenue from 2019. They will annualize that for the full year of 2019. And what we recommend doing is when you upload your 2019 tax documents in the application, that you include an uploaded note that explains that you started operation on November 10th, 2019. And that's why your revenue number is so low for 2019. And DCO has said that they're going to take that into account. So you may well still be eligible. All right, Gillian, I think I'm going to hand it over to you now. I did my best on that accounting stuff.
You did great, Casey.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in order to substantiate what Casey was just taking us through, and I really want to kind of drill down on this idea that what DCEO is looking at is a decline in revenue, because I think that the words losses or the word losses has been used a lot, and we're not talking about your organization's surplus or deficit at the end of the year. We're talking about revenue only, and we're looking at a drop in revenue, or DCO is looking at a drop in revenue. So to substantiate that, when you apply, you're going to need to submit whatever tax forms are relevant to you as either a sole proprietor or to your organization. And so this is coming right from the application and the FAQs as well. We see here that if you are right, where they're going to be looking at Form 1040, the Schedule C specifically for sole proprietors, but you do need to submit your entire tax form. That's important. But they're looking at Schedule C for sole proprietors. For partnerships, we're going to be looking at IRS, or rather DCEO will be looking at Form 1065. Corporations, it's going to be Form 1120. S Corps, Form 1120S. You do not need to include any K1 schedules if you have them, if you're an S Corp. And then for nonprofits, they're looking at the 990, the 990EZ, or the 990N, the postcard. So we're going to take you through those forms and show you really exactly what line items. I think we have a slide on the line items itself. And we've got a question in here. Give an example of nonprofit losses on our 990s. Oh, here we go. We're going to actually show you examples. So yes, and also importantly, thank you. If your fiscal year end is not a calendar year end, you're going to use the fiscal year end of the years in question, right? So we see an example here. DCEO is looking at the years 2019, 2020, and 2021. So let's say your fiscal year ends on June 30th, 2019. That is the Form 990 you're going to use, your fiscal year 2019 form, even though it started in 2018, is what you're going to use. So let's take a deeper look, I think, at the line items that they're asking for. I'm just quickly looking at a question. Okay, we will get to some specifics here, Trish, in just a moment. So DCEO is looking at declines in revenue, mostly looking at gross receipts for an organization, right? So what we have here is that if you are a sole proprietor, you're going to be submitting your full IRS tax return 1040, but also your Schedule Cs. And it's the Schedule C that they're going to go to look at your revenue and compare revenue from year to year. And it's line 1 in Schedule C. In Form 1065, it's line 1A. If you are filing Form 1120, also line 1A, and you can see how this is working, right? 1120S, line 1A, the Form 990 is line G, 990EZ is line L. Now, as Casey mentioned, if you're a nonprofit organization, DCEO is going to be looking at 3 different areas of potential decline in revenue, and they're going to choose the one that had the largest decline in revenue. In other words, they're going to try and help maximize the award by looking at that largest decline. So they're going to be looking at different, is there another animation to this slide by chance? Yeah, okay. They're going to be looking at different line items in Form 990. That gross receipts, that total income, is going to be line G. That's going to be at the top of the form, and we're going to look at this in just a moment. They're also going to be looking at your contributed income, which is summarized on line 8 in the 990, and they'll be looking at earned income as well. That's line 9. Now, if you file the 990EZ, we actually have not been given specifics about which line items those will be. We have mapped to what we think are the comparative line items in the EZ. Our contributed income is on line 1 and earned income is on line 2. When you're filling out the application, you will have fields in the application, which, by the way, everyone, is dynamic, and that application is going to change a little bit depending on what type of entity you say that you are in the application. There will be fields of entry for you to put this information in. So let's go on to the first example here. So, yep, so this right here is the Schedule C. So if you're a sole proprietor, this is the Schedule C that DCEO is going to be looking at. And Casey, if you go ahead and advance, we'll take a look specifically. This is it, line 1, gross receipts right there. Now, another important thing about this application, DCEO is going to be asking you for something called your NAICS code, N-A-I-C-S. You can find this number on almost all of the tax forms. First, I just want to give everybody, rest assured, folks, it's not really about eligibility. They're asking for that NAICS code, that business activity code, because it's just going to help them categorize, hopefully, a really large amount of applications that they're going to get for this grant so that they can just be more efficient or effective in their review of them. But it's important that you include that number. And here on Schedule C, you can see it. It's actually called your business activity code, or, yep, the business or profession, and it's B up there in the top. So let's take a look at the next one, and we'll go through these forms here. So this is a partnership return, and you can see there's a theme building here. They're looking at gross receipts on this particular tax form. That's line 1A. You can find the business code if you are a partnership and you're filing Form 1065 here in the top left, box C. That's where your business code will be. I think the next one that we have is the 1120. right? And then maybe also the 1120S is on this slide. 1120, most of these for-profit forms are going to be kind of similar in the sense that gross receipts is typically line 1A. We see that here. I know why. In the 1120, your business activity code is not on the same page. It's on a different area of that return. It's in Schedule K, which is just naturally part of the return, but you're going to have to go and look in Schedule K on page 4 to get that business activity code for that NAICS code in the application. I think next is our 1065 forms. Nope, 1120, sorry, the 1120. Similar theme here, everybody. Line 1A, gross receipts, is what DCEO is looking at. Also, we're going to go, because we have to in the application actually manually input our gross receipts for each year as well. So you're going to want to go through your forms as well before you upload them, so you have this information. And then you can see that business activity code is up there at the top left again in box B. And then I think finally we get to our nonprofit forms. Here is the 990. Here we're looking at line G of the 990 for gross receipts. The business activity codes, I'm sorry, before we even get to that. Now remember, our nonprofits, DCEO is going to be looking at 3 areas of revenue and determining which had the greatest decline. They're looking at gross receipts, which we just looked at, line G, but they're also looking at contributions, which is on line 8, and earned revenue, or your program service revenue, which is on line 9. You will also have to manually enter that information in the application. So you'll want to go through your Forms 990 to get that information. Let's advance the slide, Casey. Right, so the business activity codes in Form 990 are not very handily on the same page. They're in Part 8 here, our statement of revenue. And you can see that, you know, you may have some activities that fall under different business codes, or often these tend to be the same for a nonprofit. If you are not sure what business code to list, reach out to the help desk. We will help you identify what you need to put in there. And again, it's not an issue of eligibility, so don't stress too much over it. We're just finding a way to categorize these applications for easy review. And do we have, yep, on the easy. So the easy looks a little different, of course, from the full 990. So here they're going to be looking at line L for your gross receipts. And we again have, the business activity code, I think, is further down this form. So this slide is really showing you 2 different 990s right now. And I grabbed a real 990s here just to show you. You can see first and foremost, the snippet at the top, we can see that that is 990, and the return, the date on the return form up at the top right says 2018, because that is the calendar year 2018 form that everybody had to use. But if you notice, this particular organization's fiscal year is actually July 1 through June 30, 2019. So this would be the form that they would use for that 2019 year. Also notice that at the end of fiscal 19 here up at the top, they had gross receipts, this particular organization, of a little over $140 million. In the subsequent year, you can see their gross receipts were about $124 million. So that's a decline in revenue. That's what we're talking about there. That's what we're looking at. Not necessarily the full surplus or deficit for the organization. We're not actually concerned. DCEO is not looking at expenses, I should say here, just revenue. And then what else do we have here? Casey, yep, so we're on the FAQs. So I will toss it back to you.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go through some questions that we've just heard. We're just going to kind of go through a couple here before we get to the questions that you're putting in the Q&A box. And just a reminder, if you're putting questions in the chat, try and move those over to the Q&A box if you can. And if you see a question in the Q&A box that you also have, you can put a thumbs up like on it. There's a little thumbs up button, and that will help us judge kind of what are the highest priority questions, though I'm going to say that we can probably get to all of the questions. given how many there are so far. So a couple things for sole proprietors. We do have a specific webinar for sole proprietors, individual artists, freelancers today at 2 p.m. But one of the questions that's come up is if unemployment income affects how your whether or not you're showing a decline. The unemployment income does not show up on your Schedule C. It's in a different part of your tax form. And if you're a sole proprietor, DCO is only going to be looking at that Schedule C and the business income. So if you had to go get a job, you know, if your sole proprietorship, if you lost a bunch of money, weren't able to get work in 2020, and you had to go get another job, and that's showing up in your tax returns someplace else, that doesn't matter. DCO is not looking at that. They're not looking at did you literally starve? They're looking at did your, you know, the income and revenue you were making from your creative business, did that decline? Couple things, SVOG, PPP, big, B2B, if you've received other past funding or haven't received other past funding, none of that affects your eligibility. It's just about whether you fall into one of these categories and whether or not you experienced loss that you can show via your tax forms. If you changed your business or tax structure at some point between 2019 and 2021, when you're going through the application at the top, you should choose whichever entity type you are currently operating as. So for example, if you were a sole proprietor in 2019 and 2020 and even 2021, but then you incorporated as an LLC or incorporated as a nonprofit, then you would say that you're an LLC or nonprofit, whatever you are currently operating as. But then when you go and input your tax returns for the different years, you'll be able to see, you know, you'll be able to put in the tax returns that reflect however you were operating in those specific years. One example that's kind of a complex example, we had a couple who filed individually as sole proprietors in 2019. Then they got married and started filing their taxes jointly, still as sole proprietors in 2021. And the recommendation for them is to apply separately. They're both going to attach their full joint tax returns for 2021. And then just we recommended they include a note that says, hey, this application's for Bob, I'm that Schedule C. Hey, this application's for Barbara, I'm that Schedule C. Generally, retail is not going to be eligible. So if you are coming from the retail space, that is not eligible for this grant. We already went over the fiscal year piece, so I'll skip over that. Again, if your business launched in early 2020, you can absolutely apply. If you meet the other eligibility criteria, you will be eligible. And you will only be eligible for the minimum grant award amount of $5,000. So little things about B2B and big, we already went over that. Generally doesn't affect your eligibility. This is a totally different program. But if you did receive it, they won't look at 2020 compared to 2019 when looking for what your losses were because of COVID. Videography, photography, both qualify. Those are going to qualify under performing and presenting arts, visual arts. Some other things that do qualify that folks may not know, tattoo artists, tattoo salons, that's going to also be a qualifying and eligible business under performing and presenting arts, visual arts. If you are a makeup artist or a hairdresser, it's a little more complicated, but if the majority of your work as a makeup artist or hairdresser is in one of those disciplines, so supporting the presentation or performing of the arts, so if you're working in opera or dance or theater or video, film, then you would be eligible for this. Fiscally sponsored organizations are also eligible. The Illinois Creative Recovery Grants and B2B Arts are the same thing. Why they have two names? Buy me a beer after May 10th and we can talk about it. My organization is a private college with both an art museum and a performing arts center on campus. Would either or both be able to apply? Yes. In that case, it says there's a little chunk of the DCO FAQ that's specifically for you, but you're able to upload specific financial documents that are signed off on by the leadership of that college, rather than having to have your own tax documents, since you're not your own separate entity. What can this money be used for? Any operating expense not already covered by another federal or state grant. So it's wide open, wide open. And then one last question that we've been getting since we filed an e-postcard. So this is for small nonprofits that are under $50,000. We don't have actual tax forms to upload. How do I respond to questions 15 through 17 on the application? So 15 through 17 is where you're putting in your gross receipts, which Gillian just went through where to find those on your tax documents. So you will still need to enter your organization's gross receipts. And if you have a good bookkeeper, that'll be on your books. You can also look at your state AG 990 Illinois state tax form, line G, and that's going to be your gross receipts amount. Though to be clear on that, you don't have to submit that state tax form. They're only looking at the federal tax forms in the DCO application. Before I get to the questions in the Q&A, quick thing, we do have a help desk. So I'm going to leave this slide up while we go through the questions that have come in, but just FYI, there's additional resources at artsalliance.org/creative recovery, including a help desk where you can ask specific questions and get one-on-one support, potentially, if you're lucky, with Gillian or Chris. So big opportunity there to get more individualized support. All right, I'm going to go to the questions. 1, are 990 PF forms eligible for nonprofits? That's a great question. We actually have that question out to DCEO right now. They are confused by the question, so they're looking into it. We would recommend you go ahead and apply. Because they have not made a decision yet. So we don't know if you're eligible. You should put in an application. And generally that's going to be our answer on a lot of these things is, shoot your shot, give it a try. Yeah. Liz, does the return need to be signed or will a copy be okay? Gillian, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was thinking about that, Casey, and I don't think we have any indication one way or the other. I know that it's really common for the copy of the 990 that you have on file to be digital and not be signed. We could certainly try and find out and get back to you. However, today I would echo what Casey just said, which is shoot your shot. Maybe something we didn't mention, I apologize, Casey, if you did mention it, is that there will be an appeal process. So any organization that gets denied for an award will have an opportunity to appeal. And if that is the reason, then I imagine it might be something to be able to, that could be appealed and fixed on the back end.
Yep. Agreed. And I think especially in that case, because they don't say that it has to be signed, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here legally, but I think they would not be able to use that as a, since they haven't told anyone that they have to be signed.
I think that will sort of remain to be seen. Yeah, but I think that's definitely grounds for a viable appeal. If you've only got the unsigned one, go ahead, echoing everything everyone has already said, go ahead, submit, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. I started my business in early 2019, so I ended up making slightly more in 2020, but both years I barely made anything. My net income both years was less than minimum wage. Should I still apply? Would they consider how I was clearly just starting a business so my documents don't show the loss as well? I think that depends on how early in 2019 you started. And this is a situation where we would need a little bit more information to be able to see what the answer is. So you should go to the help desk and ask this question. And actually, when you go to our help desk and submit this question, you can attach your tax forms from 2019 and 2020 and 2021 so that our team can actually see exactly what you're working with. I think the question there is, if you started, for example, in March of 2019 and DCO applies what you made from March through December of 2019 and assumes you would have also made that in January and February, does that get you to the point where you can show a $5,000 loss? But we're going to need to see exactly what the numbers are and exactly when you started your business in 2019 to be able to determine that. So I hope that's helpful. But definitely get into our help desk, submit a ticket. Mary, if I'm understanding this correctly, if you don't have at least $5,000 decline in gross receipts at some point, then you don't qualify. Correct. Though, Gillian, do you want to give some qualification on that for the nonprofit crowd?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the eligibility requirements is that you must have suffered a decline in revenue of at least $5,000 to be eligible. So if you don't have at least 5,000, oh, you're saying a decline. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty straightforward in the eligibility. I think, if you're filing the 990N, it's just good for folks who are applying to know you still actually need to enter your gross receipts, as Casey was saying earlier, and attest to the fact that you had at least $5,000 in decline. So Mary, my gut hunch is that no, you are not eligible. However, I would still, it's a quick, compared to what y'all are used to, it's a quick grant application. It really is, if you have all your tax forms together and ready to upload. And it's free. So it wouldn't cost you any more than 20 to 30 minutes of your time. But I do want to say, as of right now, my take is that you would not be eligible.
What about 990? N, nonprofit under 50K and loss less than 5K. Gillian?
Yeah, I think that the answer is going to be the same, because they are asking for every applicant to not only supply their tax forms, but also, again, manually enter what your gross receipts were. And that is a piece of eligibility that declines in revenue needed to be at least $5,000. However, folks, I don't mean to be frustrating, just because this rolled out quickly and there are still questions that are being answered, apply. Know right now that our take, however, is that you would not be eligible.
Yep. Liz, is there a recommendation for the length of the work sample if doing a video? So this is a great question because we didn't actually talk about the work sample. First of all, with the work sample, for everyone, don't fear. DCEO is not making any sort of artistic evaluation of your work sample. So it is not looking at it based on any sort of quality. So don't feel like you need to find your absolute best possible work sample. I would say my recommendation on the length, short. You should be giving them something that is, under 5 minutes if possible. Under 3 is great. But if it's a YouTube video, that's already up and out in the world, I think that's fine, right? Because part of what the work sample is really about is for them to be able to see that you are actually operating within the creative industries. So, having a live recording of one of your performances, for example, and being able to point them to where that live recording is a great example that you are in fact working as a performing artist here in Illinois. Okay, let's see. Darshit, I'm not sure what your question is, so feel free to type in it again. This is the Big Business Owner Grant, if you want to clarify what that question is. We hold an annual charitable gala and dinner each year that we sell tickets to. It is the ceremony where we induct new members to our Hall of Fame. We take contributions and sell tickets and sponsorships for the event. In our tax return, our accountant has listed all this revenue as our program service revenue. It also happens to be our gross revenue. How do I answer this question? Do I put the same number down for both questions? Gillian, I believe this is a nonprofit PF question.
Yeah, I want to just digest it. So you're saying that your special event revenue has been listed as program service revenue, and your program service revenue equals your gross revenue. That's how I'm reading this. Definitely let us know if I'm misinterpreting that. But yes, then I think when you fill out the application, there will be a series of questions about what type of entity you are. And again, that is going to then determine how the application populates the next set of questions for you. You are going to be asked to list your gross receipts, your program revenue, and your contribution revenue. And you should use those line items on your 990. So in this instance, that means, yep, your program revenue and your gross receipts are going to be the same.
And again, if you want to get more into the weeds on this, come to the help desk. And actually, I think you're already in the help desk because we've been talking through your case with DCEO. If it's the Hall of Fame I'm thinking of, though, maybe there's more Hall of Fame applicants that are in our help desk. Okay. Do they only look at the specific line item IRS Form 1040 Schedule C line 1 for sole proprietors, or would they take any other information into account? I received pandemic recovery grants, which are making that number larger, even though the income was actually less. Can I send details on that line 1 to demonstrate this?
Yeah, Casey, tell me, I think that what we have been advising is, first of all, there will be a field where you need to upload all your tax documents. And you can upload, I believe, up to 15 documents there. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to include in that document upload some kind of note or narrative that explains that. We have been told that DCEO is asking for the full tax return so that they do have more information available to them if they need it, but then it gets a little nebulous after that. So I would say to follow the instructions in the application. It is possible, if not, in my opinion right now, maybe probable, that they will just look at that line 1, but also include a short narrative, a document with a narrative that explains that.
I'm also going to take this question. We have specifically a webinar at 2 p.m. with our wonderful cleanup hitter accountant, Kamari. So I'm also going to take this over. I'm going to save this question for that webinar and take that into our webinar at 2 p.m. But yeah, everything that Gillian just said. And again, if you want to get into the weeds on this, you can come into our help desk. Mary, oh Mary, I filled out the application yesterday. I scanned my driver's license. However, the application says I have to upload my driver's license via smartphone. I do not have a smartphone. I sent the driver's license via library scan as I did with my IRS forms. How do I send my driver's license? Mary, if you don't mind putting in the chat where you're located, let me see if I can actually get a human being to come to you and help you out with this. So Mary, if you can just drop into the chat function where you're located and your contact information. If you can't, again, come into our help desk, ask this question via our help desk, and we will try and get somebody to help you out with that, because that is clearly ridiculous. So we'll get you sorted, Mary. All right. I'm a recording engineer, so I record other people's music for release. Do I qualify? I believe yes. So you would be eligible under the performing and presenting arts because you are, facilitating, or your primary mission is around the presentation of music. You're an important piece of that process. So yes, Mary, we believe you would be eligible. Trish, I missed the beginning of this meeting due to Zoom problems. Is there a transcript? There's not a transcript, but there is a recording, and we will be posting the recording on our website and be sending it out to everyone who registered for this. How many days does it generally take to hear back from the help desk? Is it possible to talk to someone? So it is possible to talk to someone. I will say, because we're in the final sprint, we are trying to make it very, very, very fast how quickly you hear from the help desk. So we are trying to keep that to within a day, within 24 hours. Obviously, though, the sooner you get your questions into the help desk, the better. But we know there's going to be a big flood of questions here at the end, because listen, y'all, we're in the creative sector too. We know everything happens at the last minute, and it's okay. And we're here with you. So we are going to do the very best we can and have all hands on deck on our side to make sure that we're getting questions answered as quickly as possible between now and the end of day on Wednesday. In terms of talking to someone, it's going to depend on how complicated your situation is, but yes, we prefer to first see if we can resolve it via email, but if it's a really complex situation, or if you need Spanish language support, we have folks who will be able to actually get into a Zoom or a phone call and talk to you. What kind of accounting reporting is required for sole proprietors? Will we be required to report how grant money received is spent? No, there is no reporting to DCEO for folks who receive this grant, this relief grant. You get it and you go on with your life. You do need to spend it on, any eligible operating expenses that aren't covered by other state and federal grants. But outside of that, it's a very, very broad, you can use the money to keep doing your work, basically. A friend's organization experienced a flood during the Arctic freeze insurance payout, and they don't want that payout to be counted as revenue. Should they put a note? So we are definitely fans of notes, and it's unfortunate that the application doesn't literally tell you that you can put a note, because you can. So definitely, we would recommend that they include a note with their tax returns for that year explaining what happened. For sure. Gillian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, Casey, I think it depends too on where that revenue is itemized on the tax return as well. And that could be something that we could help you take a look at together offline if you wanted to reach out to the help desk. If this is not, the for-profit is not my area of expertise, and I will just say again that later today on an eligibility webinar, Kamari Kareem, who is well-versed in the for-profit side, is going to be there. But it just depends on where that revenue flows through your tax return as well. But yeah, I'm with you, Casey. Write a note, write a note, write a note.
Yep. Okay. Great, great, great. Trish, I guess I don't qualify. All I lost was $3,844 in 2021. So I don't qualify, right? Unless you lost $5,000 or more in 2020 and didn't receive the big or B2B grant, then yes, you wouldn't qualify for 2021. Can you share any more information about the Cultural Heritage Organization criteria? Boy, howdy, I wish. It's broad. It's broad. So we don't have more specific detailed information about that. That is what DCEO is going off of. So again, as we kind of said earlier, this is like a shoot your shot moment. See how DCEO ends up ruling when they review. But if you know folks who might be eligible under the Cultural Heritage Organization criteria, let them know and let them know they might as well try and put it in an application, because again, it's a very quick application. Erica, I believe this was already answered, but I wanted to be sure I'm fully understanding. If I lost revenue in 2020, but not 2021, then I'm still eligible and they will look at the worst year, AKA 2020, and my grant amount would be based on that. Correct. That is correct. You don't have to have lost money in both 2020 and 2021. Second, if my company had a decline in revenue in 2020 from 2019 of 45,000, will I receive a grant in the amount of 45,000, or is the amount just based upon that and could be less than that? It is just based on that and could be less than that. They do have a formula that they're using to ascertain the grant amounts based on what your losses are. So it'll be related to your loss amount, but it won't be the exact dollar amount. Also, if the 50 million is oversubscribed, so if we do our job really well and we get way more applicants in the next 5 days and it's over 50 million, that formula is going to lower the grant amounts of the top level first, and they will not reduce the minimum grant amount of 5,000. So it's going to affect the biggest organizations first, and then trickle down. A trickle down we believe in there. All right. You said if we received a big grant, we are still eligible, right? You are still eligible, and you need to upload the 2019 and 2021 tax forms. That's correct. I actually think on the app, I'm not sure if it automatically takes out 2020 when you say that you received a bigger B2B. The form is very smart. It's very, it's got a bunch of conditional formatting. So it may still prompt you to put in your 2020 tax returns, but yeah, they're only going to look at 2019 and 2021 if you received big. As a visual artist, I did not receive any ticket sales for public showing. Am I still eligible? So they're going to be looking at your income. So it's not necessarily ticket sales. So it could be selling your work, like how you are generating income off of your business does not need to be only ticket sales. That's just one potential way that you're monetizing your work, if that makes sense. Chris, Gillian, do you want to jump in on that at all?
No, I agree with what you just said.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I don't. I mean, as a visual artist, you're certainly involved in the presentation of art, and so yeah, whatever revenue you're bringing in, if you're operating as a sole proprietor or whatever the case may be, if it's on your Schedule C, should be sufficient.
I'm the executive director of a nonprofit that is applying, and I also on my personal taxes file a Schedule C as a sole proprietor music management and did receive more than a $5,000 reduction in income since 2019. Could I apply personally? Now, this is interesting because I don't know exactly your situation. If that sole proprietor music management is unrelated to your work as the executive director as a nonprofit, if that's your separate business, then yes, you can. And if you have multiple sole proprietorships or multiple businesses that you own, you can apply for each of those businesses. However, if you are getting paid as a sole proprietor as the executive director of that nonprofit, so if you are not being categorized as an employee of the nonprofit, but are instead being compensated on a 1099, like as a independent contractor, that's going to raise flags with DCEO that you may be miscategorized, and that could affect your eligibility. So it depends a little bit on what your exact situation is. Chris, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah. The big takeaway is that if you run or own multiple businesses, each individual business can submit their own application. Yeah, there are, but it does get a little bit more complicated if you if DCEO or the state of Illinois is looking at you as a potentially misclassified employee or misclassified worker. But if these are separate and independent entities and business services and goods and services, all of that, then yeah, submit multiple applications for each.
I'm going to pop over and just see if there's any questions real quick that we lost in the chat. So Marty, you do have to submit your full tax return, but they're only going to look at the Schedule C. And Mary, I see that you're in Wilmette. We're going to get you figured out, Mary. And I'm just writing down your name so I can find you here. I'm going to hope that you registered with your name so we can find your email address. If not, if you could pop your email address into the chat, that would be great. Okay, I think we're okay over here. Hopping back. Likewise, like Mary, I moved from Illinois in 2020 until 2022 and then back to Illinois. I think that that's going to depend on whether I think we're going to need more information about what exactly, did you file your taxes in Illinois even though you moved, like were you still generating income revenue in Illinois? Chris, I don't know if you or Gillian have any thoughts on this to add to it, but my instinct is to get into the help desk and give us a little more information about the specific circumstances. I'm going to take the silence as you have nothing to add. I would get into the help desk and add and give us a little bit more details about what exactly your circumstances are. Himlita, as of right now, there's not going to be a second wave of funding. So we got to get this $50 million out now. We got to get everyone to apply for this. Lois, if music compositional work was completed in 2019 for the purpose of a concert of premieres by a sole composer, and the concert was canceled 2 weeks before due to the pandemic, would the composer, a sole proprietor, be eligible for a grant? So yes, but not because of that specific performance being canceled. So they are not looking at the specific circumstances of why you had a decline in revenue or income. But if you made a certain amount of money in 2019 and made $5,000 or more less in 2020 or 2021, again, related to your compositional work, in general, not just on that one composition, but any kind of compositional work that you're doing as a sole proprietor that's showing up on your Schedule C, then you would be eligible. If you have more questions, hop in the help desk. I want to be cognizant of time. We're at 1:01, but we're so close. So I'm just going to push. I'm going to push here. My nonprofit organization is involved in soliciting writing from individuals, which in turn can be printed in a publication or presented orally. Does this work under the performing and presenting arts category or as a cultural heritage organization? It's going to depend on what the nature of the writing is. If you are soliciting writing for a mechanics manuscript magazine where you're talking about car engines, then that would not apply. If it is a poetry situation, if it's creative writing, if it's anything that is, then that would be eligible. So it depends a little bit again on what the specific mission of your nonprofit is and what type of writing you are soliciting. If you have more questions, hop into the help desk, give us a little more info about who you are. All right, we've got Mary's email address. I know a lot of you are probably like following this, like we are gonna get Mary's driver's license into this application, y'all. It's gonna happen. All right. How do individuals apply? Yes, this presentation will be available. How do individuals apply? Individuals have to be sole proprietors or LLCs. Your dad should definitely apply as a blues drummer if he's operating as a sole proprietor, LLC, or S Corp or whatever. We have another webinar at 2 p.m. that is specifically about that, but there's also information on our website around individual artists. he would apply under the performing and presenting arts category. And then it depends on how he's filing his taxes and how he's claiming his income. I don't file a Schedule C as an individual artist. The myriad organizations I work for as an artist paying me as an employee, not a contractor. I did, however, lose work as an artist. Is there any potential for filing as an individual if I don't file a Schedule C? Unfortunately, no, you are not going to be eligible for this grant. Yeah, that's the quick answer there. Where online is the actual application? So you can get to the application through Arts Alliance's website. So if you go to artsalliance.org creative recovery, there's a number of links there. There's the link out to the help desk, but there's also a link to the actual application on DCEO's site. There is not a really, I don't love the URL to get directly to DCEO's site. But that is where the application is housed, and it's housed on a platform called Submittable. So you'll have to make a profile on Submittable in order to put in your application. Let's see. All right. Great. Those are all the Q&A questions. Let me see if there's anything else missed in the chat. So program service revenue is what my acting money earned. So Deborah, I'm going to say, let's get a little bit more details from you. If you can come through to the help desk, so artsalliance.org/creative recovery, or if you just go to artsalliance.org, you can get to it from the homepage, B2B Arts. You can go to our help desk and submit a ticket. There's like a little button that says get help, and you fill out all your information. You can actually upload your tax documents so that we can see them. And we can get you some more specific guidance and help you with your application. Okay, we got through. I think we got through all the questions. 105, only slightly over. Thank you all so much for coming to this webinar. Thank you for getting more information. The last thing that I will leave you with is please, please, please tell your friends. You heard about it. You ended up here to get more information. Please spread the word. Please let anyone and everyone that you know who might be eligible know that this application is open through Wednesday, and that it is so easy. It is so easy to apply, and that we have resources for them if they have specific questions. Please, please, please spread the word, because again, everyone who's eligible who applies is going to get money, and it's really, really important that we get this money into all of your pockets and we not leave any money on the table, because there will not be a second wave as far as we know. So thank you so much. Again, I'm Casey, Director of Programs, Arts Alliance Illinois. If you aren't already, consider becoming a member. We are a membership organization. Our advocacy never stops. And this $50 million is a really great example of why being in a coalition together and doing this advocacy is so important. So thank you so much. And thank you, Chris. Thank you, Gillian, for being here, being rock stars as always.